Hi there, welcome to Dr. 2 Academy. This is Java tutorial for beginners, lesson number 10. The topic of lesson number 10 is static keyword. Static keyword is one of the most commonly used keyword in Java programming. If we put a static keyword in front of a variable, then this variable is called a static variable or class variable. The class variables are shared among all objects. They belong to the class. They are created at class initialization. If we put a keyword static in front of the member method, then this method is called static method. The static method are accessed by calling the class name dot method name. We don't need to create an object to use the static method. We just call the class name dot method name. The static keyword is also used to create a static blocks. The static blocks are used to initialize static variables. So we can use the keyword static to do block initialization of static variables. Now let's double-click eclipse.exe file to start the Eclipse. Now let's create a new project for this lesson. Click on File, New, Project. Java project. Click on Next. Project name, Lesson 10. Click on Next. Click on Finish. Module name, com.Dr. 2 Academy. This is the reverse order of the domain name. Java tutorial dot lesson 10. Now let's create a new class. Right click lesson 10, new, click on class. Package name is the same as the module name, com.Dr. 2 Academy dot Java tutorial dot lesson 10. Class name, code tester. Click on Finish. Now let's create the main method. Public static void main string args parentheses. Now let's create a new class, user. Right click on lesson 10, new, click on class, class name, user, click on Finish. Let's declare a static variable. user account assigned to 0. Static variable stream school is Dr. 2 Academy. Let's declare another member variable username. Now let's declare constructors for the class user. The first constructor this constructor does not have parameter, so it just set username to empty string. But it will increment the static variable user count by 1. So every time we create a new user object, we will increment the static integer user count by 1. This constructor takes in a parameter name, assign the name to user name member variable. We also increment the static variable by 1. Let's define the static method get user count. Return the static variable user count. Since all user objects are sharing the school name, we are defining a static method to display the school name. Public static string get school name. Return school. Of course, we can still define the regular method to display the object's username. return username. Write another method to set username. Assign the parameter name to member variable username. Username equals name. So in user class, we declared a static variable user count, and every time we create an object, we will increment the user count by 1. The school name is not changed for all students. So we also declared a static variable called school. The school name is shared among all users. So we define a static method to get the school name. Of course, we have the regular method of get the username and set the username. Now let's do some testing of these static variables. Let's create a user object. User 1, user 2, user 3, user 4, user 5. So now we are going to create 5 user objects. User 1 is new user. We create a new user object for user 1. We set username. We set the first username as Jeff. Now let's create a new object for user 2. Assign name Harry to user 2. User 3. Alex. User 4. Jennifer. User 5. Linda. And we want to display the user count. So let's define another variable user count. School name. So user count. To call the static method, we use the class name. Notice the capital U, not the lowercase u. This is a class name. Dot. It displays get user count, right? School name. Get the school name. Now let's copy. Control C, copy. Control V, Control V, paste. Control V, Control V. Now let's double click on this line to put a breakpoint here. Click on debug button. Let's step into the constructor. This is the first time we call the user class, so it will get into the static variables, initialize it. Step into it. Set the username. Now let's step into this static method, get the user count. Return user count. Now the user count is 1, right? We created one object, so the user count is 1. Now let's step into the get the school name. Return school name. School name is Dr. 2 Academy. Now let's create a second object. This is the second time we create a user object, so it no longer execute these two lines. They are initialized already, right? Assign the name Harry to username and increment user count by 1. Right now the user count is 1. See, the user count now becomes 2. So get the user count, step into it, return user count, assign 2 to user count, school name. You put your mouse here, you see the school name is Dr. 2 Academy. That's from the assignment of this statement. But this thing never gets changed. So if after we execute this statement, the school name is still the same as Dr. 2 Academy. Now let's create a third object, Alex. Step into it, into the constructor. Alex. The user count is 2. Now we are going to increment it by 1. So now user count is 3. Let's get the user count. Step into it. Return user count 3. The variable user count is 2, but the user.getUserCount is 3, so we get this value and assign it to variable user count. So the user count will become 3. Step over. See, the user count is 3 now. Step over. Now it's the 4th element. Now we are going to create the 4th object. Step into it. Constructor. Assign name Jennifer to username. User count is 3. We are going to increment it by 1. Now user count is 4. Get the user count. User count is 4. School name is Dr. Tu Academy. Now we are going to create another user object, Linda. Step into it. See. Name is Linda. We assign Linda to username. Right now the username is null. Step over. Now username is Linda. User count is 4. We are going to increment it by 1. Now user count is 5. Now let's get the user count. Step into it. Return user count. The variable user count is 4, but we are going to get user count 5 and assign it to user count variable. So the user count is 5 now. School name is always Dr. Tu Academy. Step over. Finish the program. So as we can see, to call static method, we always use the class name dot static method name. All objects share the same static variables, but we can update static variables from regular method or constructors. So to call regular method, we always use the object name, but to call static method, we always use the class name, because static methods belong to class and regular methods belong to each individual object. That's a key difference we have to remember. Static variables and the methods belong to class, and the regular member variables and the methods belong to objects. Let's summarize what we just learned about the static keyword. We use a static keyword to define the static variables and the static variables are shared among objects. Static variables are created at class initialization. We also use static keyword to define the static methods. To call a static method, we have to call the static method through the class name because it belongs to the class, not the object. So we never use object name to call the static method. Static method can access static variables. We also use static keyword to define the static blocks, which initialize the static variables in a batch. In our next lesson, we are going to learn Java inheritance. Java inheritance is one of the most important features of OO programming, and we will learn what is inheritance and what is the parent class, which is also called base class, superclass, and what is child class, which is also called derived class or subclass. That's all for this lesson of static keyword. I will see you next time. Bye.